Hello and welcome to another episode of That 60s Recording Podcast, the podcast that has conversations inspired by the golden era of recording. I hope that you are all having a lovely summer. I've had lots of new listeners seemingly in the last month or two, maybe as the world opens up again and people are going back to work. That's why you're all listening to more podcasts. But if you're new to this, welcome, and I hope that you're enjoying digging through the archives. Had lots of interesting guests on over the past 18 months, and hopefully a lot more to come over the next few years, or however long I'm going to be doing this for. Also had a lot of people getting in touch with me in the last week or two with suggestions. Please do keep them coming. I'm very busy at the studio, so struggling with emails at the moment. I'm not responding as fast as I'd like. But if you do have a guest suggestion, please do get in touch because I really appreciate it. And I'd love to know the specific areas that you guys want to hear about. Also, just a reminder and a thank you to everybody that's ordered a mug in the last couple of weeks. I really appreciate the support, and if you'd like to support the podcast, you can do that. If you visit my website, all you need is drums.com. There is a shop there. Okay, so this week, as I mentioned at the end of the last episode, is a conversation with a friend of mine, Andy Pickering, who lives in Sheffield, and he is a analog recording nut, and we talk a lot about tape machines. He's got a beautiful 4-track machine and recently came to my studio to record a basic track for a new single he's got coming out. And we recorded it to his 4-track, and then he's recently bought an 8-track and remixed it to 8-track. Obviously, the wonders of digital have allowed that to happen. Digital backups, that is. But yeah, he's a really interesting guy. So I would, I definitely recommend checking him out. I'll link all of the his social media stuff at the end of the episode. And so we just generally chat about his journey into music, and we're both similar ages. And it's. I thought it'd be interesting to do an episode on how you saw younger people, if you like. I'm not necessarily young anymore, but you know what I mean. So we grew up in a digital world and are rediscovering analog now, and I thought that would be an interesting perspective on just how we all deal with that kind of thing and adjusting our mentalities. So that's what the majority of this episode is about, and I hope that you find it interesting. So here we go, Andy Pickering. Okay, so I am joined here by Andy Pickering, who is based in Sheffield, and I am going to pass it over to you to introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about what you do, and then we'll sort of discuss what this sort of episode is going to entail.
Hey, everybody. So, yeah, Andy Pickering here. I'm a singer-songwriter, mostly into the 1960s, which is funnily enough why I've ended up on this podcast. And I run a humble analog home studio and usually put out about one EP a year and mostly focus on writing music and recording music in that classic vein.
So I thought it would be interesting. We worked together recently on a track where Andy came to my studio and brought his 4-track recorder, and we worked on a track completely analog. And we've kind of been in touch for a little while before that. And I thought that this would be an interesting conversation to discuss not only sort of your history, but the sort of processes and sort of highs and lows, if you like, of learning as two relatively young men, the pitfalls of learning how to set up an analog studio. Essentially, we haven't grown up in that era, and we've kind of come into music through a digital lens, and suddenly, taking an interest in analog stuff has been an interesting journey from my point of view, and I'm sure it has been from yours. So I think that's the sort of overarching goal of this. Perhaps you could just tell us a bit about your musical background. So when did you start playing piano? Was it? I guess you started quite young.
Yeah, I started playing piano at the age of 5 and had like traditional piano lessons. But it wasn't really until I was about 16 that my piano playing influenced what I was like listening to and vice versa. Before that point, like piano playing was something that I really loved to do, but it was completely just, a separate thing. I
Yeah.
would play like classical or ragtime or blues and stuff like that, just because that's what I'd learned. But I wouldn't like be listening to that. If you know what I mean? It wasn't.
Yeah. What in terms of what music was happening in your household?
Uh,
Was it sort of what you're into now, or was it other stuff?
that is of my parents' era, but yeah, I mean, I would say that my dad's record collection definitely influenced me. But I grew up listening to Billy Joel and of course like the Beatles too. But also this would have been in the 90s as well, so there was all sorts of stuff. I had an older brother and sister who were into like my brother was into dance music and my sister was into like heavy metal.
Oh,
So
cool.
like I say, it wasn't until I was about 16 when I went to music college that when after I'd left school, that the skills that I'd learned from the piano could then translate into music that I was getting into, which then became like from that point, like just mad on the 60s basically. But
Yeah.
growing up, yeah, it was just a complete mixed bag. And I wouldn't say I was a huge, obviously I liked music and listened to music, but I mean, when I was a kid, it wasn't like I was obsessed with really good music. I listened to just like crap that was on in the charts, and kids like I wasn't like a 10-year-old listening to the Kinks.
Well, you and me both. I mean, reluctantly, I don't think I've ever. I don't even want to say it, but I've started saying it now. But my first ever album that I bought, that I chose to buy myself, was the Spice Girls' Spice. And I sort of convinced myself it's good because I think of, if you think of the Please Please Me album, that's like proper bubblegum pop of that era. And I kind of think of the Spice Girls as being the same, but maybe I'm just kidding myself.
I had some shockers sort of era. I mean, I had the Hanson album, so
Oh, me too. I learned how to play that drum beat, the boom, chat, ticka, ticka, doom, chat, along with that album.
and yeah, so it was a while until I sort of got into the tastes that then shaped my musical future.
Well, I think that listening to that kind of stuff, I mean, whether you like the production on it or not, or the the sort of content of the songs, they're just good quality pop songs. Essentially, they're very well written, tight pop music, and that will have influenced your songwriting.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's a big, you go back to sort of the 90s really, and you go to the mainstream stuff, which would have been like absolutely, listened to every day, just on the radio, on the TV. It's like, oh, this is like, compared to what I guess would be called mainstream now, it actually sort of does resemble proper music.
I agree with you. So then how did you get into songwriting? So like as a 16-year-old pianist, at what point did songwriting come into it?
That came, actual songwriting came quite a bit later. If you class songs as words and music, that is. I used to write music, but I was never a vocalist, actually. I didn't start singing until I was about 21.
Oh, wow.
Realized that I never even tried or anything. So, but yeah, it was basically just learning to write tunes, I guess. And then I very early on joined bands. By this point, I'd met like a group of friends at college who, now to me, that was like a really big turning point, because all of a sudden it had people my own age. So if you're at school and everyone's got so many varied interests, you're just thrown into big classes. At college, all of a sudden you've got, maybe 10 people who have chosen to do this music thing. And within those 10, maybe 5 were like, oh, we really love the Beatles, and we really love Led Zeppelin, and we really love the Doors. And at that point, and 16 is still quite young, I'd never heard the Doors before, and that gave me what keyboards could be in music and influenced my sound and my feel and my playing style. And I was lucky to be at that age where I could go out and buy the Doors, the best of the Doors, like music script, and play it. So all of a sudden, I could, play Light My Fire and Break On Through and Riders on the Storm and all that. And basically, when we had this thing called the Swift Flash in where I grew up, which is like a little pamphlet for a local pamphlet, basically. And I saw a Hammond organ in there, bought that, like 50 quid. I got this 1960s Hammond organ. Wish I still had it, but we're talking a long time ago. This is like early 2000s.
Yeah.
And that was it then. From there, just mad on the 60s. Haven't looked back.
Amazing. I love the idea that you bought a Hammond organ. You just bought it. It must have been like the best feeling ever. I mean, I can remember trips to, it was Virgin Megastores where I lived, and trips to Virgin Megastores and sort of rooting around in the singles bin of sort of vinyl singles, actual records, and people didn't want them. They're like 99p. You've seen them. I've got a few on the wall at the studio, and it must have been pretty exciting for you when you discovered that there was sort of interesting music that you could play as a piano player. It wasn't just your grade systems and that kind of stuff.
Because before that, like sort of, I did GCSE music, but before that, coming out of school, I didn't realise what a keyboard player's role in a band was, or too much. A lot of the stuff I was listening to was just guitar music, classic 90s indie. Everyone was into Oasis and stuff like that. It was like I couldn't play guitar at all then, and I just didn't realize how I fit into a band. Then all of a sudden, you hear the Doors or a track like Green Onions or something like that, and that was the sound. That was just it for me. And I still don't really own a synthesizer, because very like if I'm putting keyboards on a song, it's either organ or piano. Gone past 1969 yet.
What was your first studio experience?
That would have been in my first band. So I was in a band called The Undergrade, which was when I was 18. So this was, college friends, all like-minded, ridiculously Doors sounding. The lead singer was actually the writer, but I would write a lot of the music. So we were my first collaboration, and that was a great time because we were writing original songs, and it was about the same time that The Coral came out, about 2002.
Yeah.
And they were doing a very similar thing to us, like completely incidental, and we got instantly into that whole like London A&R scene, and we're like so young now thinking about it, like going down to London and being scouted, and we had a manager, and unfortunately we never really went too far, but we did loads of great gigs and stuff, and that was every band that I've been in actually has been ridiculously 60s, and we were very Doorsy. So at this point I'd got like a portable Hammond organ, and that was just my job. I didn't sing, I didn't play guitar, I just co-wrote and just played keyboards basically.
Cool. And do you remember were you recording stuff at home, or did you visit, is this Sheffield based?
Yeah, first recording experience. So in that band, yes, we won a battle of the bands in Leicester, and with the winnings was 3 days in a recording studio.
Oh, amazing.
Recording studio. Now looking back to that was actually quite an old school recording studio in terms of this would have been 2002, so it was, I wouldn't say it was necessarily pre-digital, but the recording studio, it wasn't tape, but I think it was ADAT, but it was still like the old-fashioned big old mixing desk, and you record onto this little machine, and yeah, absolutely loved it. Absolutely, like for me, being in a recording studio for the first time, that was like just somewhere I knew I wanted to be.
they felt cool,
Yeah.
didn't they? It was a, there's the old sort of spaceship analogy, and it did. I can think of the times that I was in studios and not understanding what they were, and you've got this. It was all decked out really nicely, and it felt like a cool space to be, and everybody who was there was cool. And then hearing yourself back was cool, if a little unpleasant at times. But yeah, it's definitely, they have a cool aura about them, don't they?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, and from that point, then that band then led into another band, and then further down the line, I'd ended up being in studios quite a lot. But this was still quite a long time before I'd done anything myself.
This is a very separate point, but you've had some very cool band names. I was looking through just the biog on your website, and pretty much every band you've been in has had an absolutely brilliant name.
Yeah, well, the Undergrade was the first one, which it was literally everyone was given like a university undergraduate prospectus sort of thing, and I just was like, oh, that's a good band name. And it was kind of a lot of people missed the point, but we were the only people on our course, our band, that didn't go to university. So it was like sort of trying to be like, yeah, well, we're the Undergrade, But then the Midbeats, and then later the Draytones.
All of them are brilliant names. I'm jealous. I think of some of the crap band names that I've had in the past, and they're all incredible. So at what point did you start to take an interest in, or do you remember a time where you kind of considered that studio was something that you would sort of taken a bit of a keener interest in?
Absolutely. So that was also in the Undergrade. That was when I first got it wasn't mine, but I sort of acquired it from our bass player, a 4-track basically. So all the way back then, I was recording the band, which may or may not have hurt our career, because I was putting out ridiculously lo-fi recordings and I didn't really know what I was doing. And I was like, yeah, this is going to be our album. And we would literally record in our drummer's dining room, and we would have 4-track cassette, and we'd just have, so there was 4 people in the band, and we'd have 3 tracks and save 1 for vocals. So drums would have 1 track, and then we'd like have a couple of sort of room mics picking up. I mean, it was ridiculous. We'd just like share a bass and guitar, but it was just capturing a live thing. And that was pretty much where it started for me, in terms of you get the tape home and then you play it through the speakers, and it's like, oh, that sounds great, like even on that sort of primitive way of doing it.
Were you whoa, what? I love the fact that these weren't even demos. This was you sort of going, this is what we're going to put out.
Yeah. I mean, it did. I'd probably got a bit of experience before we did the actual record like that, which was just called the Mini Album, which it was not really a very creative title, but basically, I mean, it started from, I had this little Roberts radio, which had a built-in condenser mic, and actually for a little tape radio, sounded quite good. And we used to record the music on that, and then record that onto track 1, and then overdub vocals and maybe a tambourine or something on the others. But it escalated to the point of where it was like, oh, now why are we using this Roberts radio? What's this point in capturing the music with that? Let's have like a microphone each. And slowly but surely I started getting the hang of it. And then I guess like my dad's office, I was still living with my parents at the time, became a tiny little studio, I guess you could call it. That was a 4-track, little hi-fi speakers, a little amp, and I had a microphone, and then we'd do the music, and then the singer would come round and he'd do his vocals, and then I would maybe do some percussion or something, and also at this point I'd got a really sort of rubbish computer program. I think it was called Magix. like a Pro Tools Logic sort of thing. And I would then mix into that maybe a few additional overdubs. And that was it for me, yeah. Like had produced a record.
It's so cool.
Whether it's got charm, and I like the fact that it's so live and so unedited and so raw and ridiculously naive making that, in terms of I had no idea how to do it, but I did it.
Well, you learn by doing, don't you? You know, that's it. Did you have what was your sort of thought processes in terms of mic placements and things? Were you just winging it, or did you have an idea of what you were doing?
Not really, no. I mean, part of our college course was like music technology and like studio stuff, but I wasn't probably using the best advice on how to mic a drum kit up when I'm hanging one mic off like a lampshade or a light fitting above the drums head, like a mini chandelier, and we'd just like hang the mic off there, or hang a mic off, a curtain rail, that kind of thing. It was very just makeshift, and if it makes a sound and it sort of sounds like what you're trying to capture, that's good enough to take home.
What do you remember? What the machine was that you were using?
It was a Yamaha.
Okay, and do you still have that, or is that gone?
It wasn't even mine. It was our bass player's one, but I ended up having it at like my house for a year or so. And at that point, I'd sort of started recording random other things on it as well. I was doing a bit of hip hop on it, for instance, and stuff like that. Because around that time, before I'd got into all the 60s stuff, like I was massively into my hip hop. So I still had that kind of. It was around the time when the Streets came out. It was original material. So I was like, oh yeah, I want to make some beats, But anyway, that's going off topic on this. But yeah, basically, yeah, that was my recording thing. And then the bass player, we started another band called the Midbeats, which
great name.
Classic. Like, we fell out with the singer, so we formed our own band. And there's actually a video on YouTube of that called the Midbeats, from the beginning, I think it is. And we'd filmed this whole. We went to a cottage about 2005. So I think when I started, it was 2002. That's like when I actually started recording. So 3 years on, and he'd got an 8-track like Port Studio Tascam one, still cassette. And yeah, so by that point, I'd done a few records, little things here and there for the band. And it's quite funny. He was actually the avid sort of recording person with all the equipment, and I sort of, ended up having all of his stuff and doing it all from my house. But it's basically, we went to a cottage and filmed it in the middle of Shropshire, border of Wales, and basically took all of our equipment in this 8-track, rented this cottage, and then did a week recording there. So that was like the next step up for getting into, all analog production. But I got to say, at that point in time, it wasn't like we were trying to be ironic or doing anything kind of, oh, this is a bit, old school. It was kind of 4-tracks and things, and cassette was still not completely obsolete at that point in time. And it was still like, particularly on eBay, like an affordable way to get something pretty decent to record with, and they'd not all completely broken down by that point. So, so we got a lot of mileage out of that 8-track, and that was recorded an EP, all analog again.
Did that feel? Did the 8-track feel like a luxury compared to the 4-track?
Yeah, for sure. Really good machine, actually. That Tascam 8-track. But yeah, graduating to 8-tracks definitely felt like a luxury. And at that point, we did that record. We had no digital end whatsoever.
I just really admire the. I don't know. Maybe I'm. Maybe this is wrong, but it's almost this sort of naive innocence of going like, we're just going to do it ourselves. Like, you almost didn't know anything different. And when I was in bands at the same time, that was that option never even occurred to us. Everything was. rehearsed in rehearsal rooms, and I can remember recording straight to a CD from a rehearsal room. That's how we demoed songs. And then we had to pay a studio day. And, it was never doing it ourselves, didn't even occur to us.
Yeah, I just loved messing around with it, all that sort of stuff, That was kind of like the and the control. We'd done studio stuff. So up to this point, I'd recorded a couple of records myself in both bands. And at that point, we'd probably done a few studio things as well. And, the studio stuff never had as much charm, and the performances were never quite as good, basically because you're forced to just do it, in a day.
Of course.
Mixed, and you've got the CD in your hand in a day. So, and we had no idea really how to be prepared for that.
It's end a lot of pressure, isn't it?
Bad, and that's mixed badly, and it's nothing to do with the person in the studio. They're just doing the best in the time that you've got, but doing it yourself, you've got the freedom to explore the possibilities of what you can do, and that's something you can't do in a studio unless you're like, a famous band and you've got loads of studio time. And so basically, having your own facility was like, I'd rather do something that probably sounds a little bit more lo-fi, but it's got way more vibe to it than a kind of, that was the ethos moving forward anyway.
And so I've seen, I've not been, but I've seen sort of where your studio is currently at. How did it get from your bass player owning an 8-track to where you're currently at?
So that's fast forwarding now quite a few years after that. So say if that was 2005 era, for the next sort of 3 or 4 years, we recorded on that 8-track, and the band progressed, and we sort of had a home studio. We like lived together and stuff, classic like sharing a house with your mates in your 20s, that kind of thing. And we had like a room dedicated to like the music room, and but then, so that band, to go back to another question about writing songs, the Midbeats, that was where I picked up a guitar for the first time. I didn't even learn guitar until I was 21, or singing, and that's where my songwriting started. So that was a huge, if you trace back what I've been doing, like the Midbeats was like the first time I sung and wrote songs. So that was, once that had finished, that was when I got my calling to be the rock and roll star and joined a band called the Draytones, which was a band that I met on like tour, and they were looking for a keyboard player, but they were signed and kind of, I went to Argentina and like played all over Europe, and all of a sudden I was playing in a band that had fans and actually had albums in HMV, and it was like me actually experiencing, I say making it. I mean, I never really made any money off it or anything like that, but I got to live the life for a couple of years, and it was a fantastic band, exactly suited to the type of music that I do and had been doing up to that point. So talking about the studio thing, so basically by the time I joined the Draytones, I didn't have a home studio. It was someone else's gig really that I was helping. So the lead singer, Gabriel, he was massively into the 60s. If anyone hears the Draytones, they'll go, oh yeah, like huge, 60s garage, or like Beatles, Kinks, that sort of thing. And I was helping, doing arranging and writing little bits in here and there, but I was joining someone else's band. So all of a sudden I was, for the first time, without my own thing. And that's where the solo thing started, and that's where the start of the home studio was, basically. And that started with me going, well, I've, been writing songs for a few years now. I've got a few songs that I'd done with the Midbeats. I'd never recorded anything on my own before. So this is 2010, 11 now, so it's like 10 years ago. Never recorded anything myself. But I didn't really have any equipment to record anything myself. Like I say, the 8-track wasn't mine. The 4-track, before that wasn't mine. And so I was like, I want to do some lo-fi demos at home. And I bought a karaoke machine. Went like super, super lo-fi. And bought this cassette karaoke machine that had like 2 decks in it. So you could do the classic...
Oh no, sorry, my makeshift jam jar mic stand has fallen down. Hold on. Oh my goodness. Right, I'm back in the game.
Okay. So this karaoke machine, had 2 decks. The classic, like you record on one tape, then you mix, you could record that onto the other deck whilst overdubbing and keep going back to forward. And it had like a little built-in spring reverb, microphone input, guitar input. That lasted not very long until I was like, this is kind of cool, but maybe I should get a 4-track again. So that's where the Marantz came. I was on eBay. I saw a Marantz in Leicester. Never heard of a Marantz PMD 740, which is what I'm now known for. You know, honestly, I get contacted by people all over the world all the time about that machine because basically after I'd been using it for a while, I put a post on Gear Sluts, which is now called Gear Page, I think, or
Gear Space.
Gear Space, sorry, yes. And I guess I was just first in the race with that machine, and no one had ever really talked about it. And I put this post up saying, "Oh, this is what I've recorded with it." And it just, if you type in that machine now, my thread is like at the top of Google. So therefore, I get contacted a lot. And yeah, so basically, I got the Marantz, and it sounded fantastic. It was like a really hi-fi machine, and it was nice to hadn't used a 4-track for years. And then, so, I mean, all I had at that point was a 4-track. I had a friend who was at university in Leicester doing a like recording music technology course degree. And I used to borrow mics from the university through him and bring them home. So sometimes I'd have like a nice Neumann mic and I'd be, doing stuff there. And so that's where the home studio started. And I didn't even have a microphone of my own, but I had. Makes me sound like a cheapskate. I don't have like my own equipment. It was never really a case of that. It was.
Oh no, it just seems like the gear's been around you, and you've not needed until this point. You're not needed to buy anything.
I would like to say before moving forward that throughout these bands and through, I have been immersed in 60s music, like obsessed with. The Beatles being the main one, of course, but like that's clearly influenced my writing and the way that I think about sound and the way I capture sound and the way that I sort of research. I'd be much more interested in hearing how a recording was set up in the 60s or even the 50s as well. All that Norman Petty studio stuff, I'm like obsessed with that. And that's always fed in. I'm still recording on a humble 4-track in a bedroom, but you're still using that sort of, mentality to sort of try and make your own records and learn. And that's where it all started, basically.
So what is it? I mean, I probably know the answer to this question already, but what is it about that era that makes it so intriguing to you?
I don't know. For some reason, that, even though it's not of my generation at all, the 60s stuff just sounded like magic to me. And that whole, like, just the sound and the songwriting as well. Above and, beyond everything, songwriting is the most important thing. That's one thing that sometimes you could talk about, equipment and how do you get that sound? And people asking, and it's like, often is overlooked the type of music that you're recording. And I could have this analog setup like I've got now, but I could be recording, like 80s pop and it wouldn't have that sound, but it's still using the same equipment.
It's almost a confluence of both of them that, I've picked up So by the time this episode goes out, people will have heard I was chatting with Ron Ryan, which is and hopefully we'll do this project together that people will know about soon. And in digging into Ron's history, I ended up buying a compilation of five CDs that was sort of European 60s garage pop. And some of the songwriting on it's very good, but it's very simple and almost bluesy. And, I can see that there's obviously fantastic songwriting happening. And there's also, I don't know quite how to explain it, like energetic songwriting that's really vibey. And the songs themselves there's not a lot of content there, but there's something about it that's just exciting. And that doesn't seem to exist in any other era to me. That it's something, there's something so young and fresh and cool about it all.
Yeah, it's if you've ever done sessions as a band in studios like we were talking about earlier, and you think of the kind of records in the same time frame that they were coming out with, obviously there's people that you've never heard of that probably didn't come out with something so great. But I mean, it's just crazy. Obviously there was a lot of jobs in those days in terms of like you'd have the songwriter and the performers and the engineers and then the producer, and when all those things really cooked, it was like it's just magic, isn't it? Really, it's just quite unbelievable.
I don't know whether I don't know whether you agree with this or not, but one of the things that appeals to me so much about it is the sounds that you're hearing. That those sounds were made sort of naturally in somehow, whether they've been manipulated it by tape or whatever. There's something scientific about it. Whereas when you hear sounds that are coming out now, the sounds have been made using a plugin or some sort of wizardry, and they don't seem as accessible to me. And that's one, I love the idea that with 4 tracks and some instruments, you can make those cool sounds.
Well, that's my whole ethos was the frustration with music in general, in terms of in our time period and sort of what I was into. That's where my slogan, a lost world of honest analog sound paired with classic pop, I feel like that defines what I do. And honest is like the big thing for me, in terms of I'm recording something that actually makes a sound with a microphone, onto tape, or even if you're doing it digitally, but you can still use the same ethos, That's the big one for me. And so all those 60s records, that translates to me in something that really, makes me feel something, makes me jump out, and it makes me want to do it and learn how to do it. That's kind of...
I agree with you. I'm interested. Something that we, you've become my sort of analog advice guru. Something that we WhatsApp a lot about is the pitfalls of buying tape machines. So people might have seen on my my Instagram that I've recently bought a 4-track inspired by you and your Marantz. And in terms of when you bought that Marantz, were you aware of? Well, first of all, let's discuss what are the pitfalls of buying equipment. Say now, I mean, I know 10 years ago it's closer to sort of the 80s when these machines were starting to become popular. But what were the pitfalls that if anyone listening is looking into tape machines or has one that isn't working, what's your what should you be looking out for essentially?
If you're buying a machine, it's got to be serviced, or because they're old, they're 30 plus years old, some of them now. So if you're just buying something that someone advertises as working well, like history of like, I've had the belts changed and I've had this recapped or that recapped, it's going to fail probably. They're far exceeding their life expectancy. It's just like, look at it like, vintage cars or anything. You wouldn't expect to uncover a car that's been in a garage for 30 years or something and expect it to just drive out. They just take work. So really important to find a tech, and they're quite few and far between. Best thing to do is if you could do that sort of stuff yourself. I can't. I'm rubbish. I can change a belt and obviously clean my head and demag, but that's pretty much it. I'm not going to be opening the machines up and like recapping things, and I'm not I'm not an electrical engineer or anything like that. But that is the main thing, is if it works, because the analog gear, particularly tape machines, don't work quite a lot of the time. So that's something that is so important to look for, is someone that's selling it. Obviously you can take a chance and things can work great, but nowadays if someone's selling, it's going to have some history of having new belts at least, because the belts turn to goo and stuff, and if you turn it on and try and run it and the belt's gooey, it's going to just cause an absolute nightmare in your transport.
It does seem from our conversations that these, I mean, I looked for techs just because because of my Revox, if it ever needed servicing, or I was looking at what 4-track to buy, and again I was looking at working order but no history of servicing, and thinking if I spend 250 quid on something and take a chance, the chances are I'm going to have to find a tech. And we were discussing this, and there doesn't, the sort of the people I know, you included, who are interested in all of this, don't have techs nearby. Everyone's posting stuff off to the far reaches of the country.
Luckily with Porter Studios, you can post them, and sometimes that can actually be cheaper than your petrol to drive it somewhere, and your time is also. When you're talking about reel to reels, that's a whole other thing, because they're super big and heavy. But yeah, it's just the ethos is if you're buying one, you want to know a bit about the machine, a little bit about its history. It's just like buying a car. Honestly, when I started driving, it was like the advice was, the most important thing is to have a good mechanic. Sort of the same thing. Like, you don't have to instantly know a tech to buy one, but whoever you're buying the machine off, you're gonna have to have a little bit of reassurance about the fact that it's going to have been serviced at some point recently, had the belts changed at least. Condition of heads on 4-tracks compared to reel seem to be fine. Like, the heads on 4-tracks, I've never really seen worn heads, to be honest. Definitely not in the way that in reel-to-reels, the heads can really wear and you need to get them relapped and stuff. I've never heard of like heads being relapped for a 4-track or anything like that. So yeah, it's just, got to do your research a little bit on the machine, and don't expect to buy something that, because everyone advertise it as seems to be working well, or like powers on, but and it's like powers on and seems to be working well, and the person selling it's just got no idea whatsoever, and you get it, and then it's like awful wow and flutter or something like that, and then you're going to have to either learn how to do the work yourself, or find someone to do it, or find the parts. And there's a number of routes you can do. You can change belts yourself. There's a lot of information out there now, particularly on YouTube and stuff, of people opening these machines up, particularly the more popular Tascam models. But yeah, owning anything like this, it's a mechanical machine. It is likely to break. So we live in an age where if you are recording on them and it's anything that you want, as you're going along, back it up digitally as well.
Yeah, it does seem, I mean, I can literally turn the power in my studio on and off, and that will solve a problem sometimes. It's so ridiculous.
Some gremlins in it, I tell you. I still can't figure out what on earth happened when I brought the 4-track there to that channel, and that the VU was just stuck on.
Well, classic example, you tested it before you came to mine, and it just wasn't, for whatever reason that day, just wasn't happening.
That channel just wasn't happening, and it was such a bizarre thing, because I've been using it for 10 years, and had it serviced. But also the microphone thing as well. That microphone that I brought, the Electro Voice, honestly, there is nothing wrong with that microphone. I've recorded with it ever since, and it's loud and clear and works perfectly. In your studio, nothing. Absolutely nothing.
It's I mean, there's no explanation, is there? But that's part of the fun, is that, we had to, you just have to get on, and there's no, there's nothing you can do. That's what we were doing that day. We were like, right, fine, we're doing it with 3 tracks now. The drums are mono.
That's it. And luckily it worked. It worked perfectly in the end. So.
So there we go, part 1 of my conversation with Andy Pickering. You can find out more about Andy on his website, which is andypickering.co.uk. He's also on Instagram, which is at Andy Pickering Music. I'll probably put a post about it on my Instagram too, if you want to check that out. So that's it for this week. That just leaves me to say a big thank you to my good friend Joe Kane and David Henshaw for the artwork and the music. Also now a big thanks to Rory Hancock for supplying the means to get this up on the internet. So thank you, Rory. I hope you all have a fabulous week, and I will see you next week with part 2. Goodbye!